everybody. This is Heather Riggs at the New England Museum Association. I'm here in our Arlington offices taking advantage of our AC today instead of at home. Hope you guys are in AC as well. If you guys just want to type in the chat feature where you guys are actually you know what organization you're coming from, so everybody knows, everybody else that's on the call. This is a good way also to maybe future network with other people of like, hey, I saw you on this call. What do you think of this? That would be great because we do appreciate the networking that happens through our town halls and the collaboration that goes along with that one. So to get us going, all of our NEMA town halls have been recorded and are available on the NEMA website. So just go under conference and events and you'll see a link to our YouTube channel. If you have to leave a little bit early or want to share this with your colleagues, that would be great too. So I'm going to keep it minimal because today I know we have a lot to discuss about visitor services. It's something that has come up quite a bit in our other town halls and stuff like that. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to introduce our facilitators. It's Michael Buzek. He's the director of Fruitlands Museum Portfolio at the Trustees, and Karen Fisk, director of marketing and communication strategy at the Springfield Museums. And today, just to let you guys know, Springfield Museums are opening up to their members. So Karen has a lot of work today. So yay, bravo to her and stuff like that. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael then.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Is the feedback better now, Heather?
It's manageable.
Okay, good. So glad to be with everybody. Like Heather said, my name is Michael Busack. I am the director of what we call the Fruitlands Museum Portfolio with the Trustees, which means I have a set of properties, which includes a museum and several historic houses. So Fruitlands Museum in Harvard, Mass, and the Old Manse in Concord. Because Fruitlands Museum is both a museum, but it's also situated on 215 acres of conservation land. We were in, a unique perspective of being able to open up a little bit early post-COVID for grounds access. So we've gone through some of these things a little bit already. So I'm hoping some of the things that we learned firsthand is a little bit helpful for folks, but we still have a lot to learn every day. But so Fruitlands opened mid-March when grounds for passive recreation was allowed to be open again in the state of Massachusetts. So we really took a very careful tiered approach while still trying to commit to our mission of providing access to our visitors. So we first really, I think, took counsel with our frontline staff and really assessed, would this be something that they would be willing to do in their safety concerns and challenges to really see if this would be even feasible. And to our excitement, I think a lot of our staff was eager to get back out there, but in a really safe, controlled manner. So we started, like I said, by just providing very minimal access in mid-March, which is we sold tickets strictly in advance for parking and access to our grounds only. We did things like we removed all of our benches that could have surfaces that people could touch. We did not provide access to our restrooms. We have 3 miles of hiking trails that we created detailed signage and made one direction so that way people weren't clustering on the trails. And we think most importantly, what was really important for us was to open and collect as much data as possible in those first weeks in the safest way. So we really talked to a lot of visitors. We took extra precautions, and then as things, we had more data and things became more safe in our minds, we slowly started opening up next tiers. So we've opened up our restrooms recently. We have a takeout version of our cafe that's operating touchless. We have also a curbside version of our pop-up gift shop now that is open. And now with stage 3, which we're entering in Massachusetts, we're allowed to have a little bit more leeway with gatherings. So we're starting to introduce some programming and lighter programming and some tours that are outside based only. And then we are hoping in the next tier by the end of August to get exhibitions open in our modern gallery space, but historic houses are still sort of a challenge. So I think in order to do that, we really needed to create a few different things. We worked organizationally to come up with really airtight operating procedures that we had to have reviewed internally through the trustees, staff, and management, but we also worked with our local Board of Health to make sure that we were following what their recommendations are. And as we update new things and we add new offerings to Fruitlands and our daily experience, like the cafe and things like that, we go through this process all over again, which is time consuming and challenging, but I think has really helped us to assure the community, our visitors, and most importantly, our staff who are help managing this, that we have taken every precaution to keep things safe and that we have their backs, which has been really important. Another thing that we did prior to reopening that I really suggest for most folks is doing your own PR campaign around conditioning visitors to what they can expect when they do return to your property. For us, I think there's a lot of behaviors that we really want to make sure that people are following by to keep safe practices that they might not be used to when visiting our museum. So we put out a whole series of videos through the trustees about trail behaviors that are really strong suggestions about social distancing, best practices. And we did this 2 weeks before we even open our properties to try to really push the folks what to expect when they came. And then the other thing that the trustees did that I think that was really important was we created an internal video that was about staff safety training that all staff were required to participate in prior to reopening. That was really focused on, again, here's what to expect when you come back to work, and here's what we really need from everybody who participates in reopening to make sure that we keep a safe atmosphere for everybody. So I would say all that sounds, when we started, very scary in a way, and it's essentially like creating your business model over again. But I think this has allowed for us to have a very safe experience, and our visitors have been overwhelmingly really supportive. I think we're lucky in Massachusetts to have people who are just really grateful for the opportunity to come back and have a cultural experience again, but also just they have been extra careful in returning to our spaces. And a lot of the worries that we had about people refusing to wear masks, knock on wood, we've had no real challenges. So I'm hoping that that continues as people start changing their behaviors and more things start opening up. But so far, so good for us. Karen.
My turn? Okay. Hi,
Yeah,
everybody.
I think it's your turn.
Really great to see everybody's faces there. I want to say that Michael's videos are really incredible. And if you have an opportunity to take a look at them, they're absolutely top notch, really helpful. And we just having the conversation between us getting ready for this got me going in that direction for our staff and for our public. So thank you so much for that, Michael. So these are unprecedented times. That's sort of the understatement of the century, I think. For many reasons, people are feeling anxious and on edge. They really need reassurance. They really need to feel that they are truly as safe as they possibly can be. And what that really has taken here at the museums, the Springfield museums, is time to talk and time to listen and time to address issues that have come up as we're getting closer and closer to reopening. Today is our reopening day. So we really started thinking about reopening almost the day that we closed. We realized that there was going to be a shortage of supplies. We realized that we'd have to rethink a lot of what we do, as Michael said, like almost like a whole new business plan for our museums. So we had a lot of time to talk. And even though we had all that time to talk, right up until just a few minutes ago, I was answering questions and sort of finishing some things that needed to be finished for this first opening day. So that's not to be unexpected, but interesting all the same. Again, very early on, we realized so many people pivoted and did such great work, like putting together these town hall meetings with really useful information in them. We've gone to so many different webinars and learned so much from each other. I have to say that Dr. Erin Bromage's video or recording just a few weeks ago completely helped us, really helped us rethink some of what we were doing. We changed some of our protocols because of what he had to say. So thank you for putting that together. Masks, of course, have been a huge issue. They've become political. We are not considering them political. We are considering them absolutely mandatory. And I have to say that we went through a period of time just getting our own staff used to wearing masks. We have provided them with a very high quality mask, masks that have filters in them. They can have the filters or they cannot have the filters, but this is a really important thing for us to make sure that our staff had the very best masks we could find. We used the recommendation of Dr. Bromage for that choice of mask. We also ordered some masks that have the clear part in the front in case we had visitors who came who were lip readers. But we're experimenting with them. We're afraid they're going to be kind of hot. So we've got a couple of other accommodations in place. We've done our research about ADA and masks and also the use of medical exceptions for masks. And we know that you can use a scarf or a face shield, which are less restrictive to breathing and are still safe. We are not letting anybody into our museums without some sort of face covering, which is, we're nervous about that. That's something that's causing us some anxiety, but that is what we believe will keep our staff and our public safe. We thought a lot about how many mask breaks our staff should have. I know that we've all gone to the grocery store and seen that the people at the registers are wearing masks all day. And I asked, how many times do you get a chance to take a break? And they only got one chance to take a break, at least the ones that I spoke with. And we felt like that was not enough chances for breaks for our staff. So we really worked to make sure that they would get 5-minute breaks on a regular basis to take their mask off and take a few breaths without the mask on. But we had to make sure that we had a bunch of single occupancy rooms with air filtration in them that would allow for that to happen. So we put that into place. We put up plexi shields like I'm sure all of you have done. We've done no touch money transactions, but because Massachusetts is a state that you have to take cash, we've done some thinking and problem solving around how to do that in the cleanest possible way. We have lots of hand sanitizer. I'm sure you all do too. If any of us have stock in hand sanitizers, we're doing great. Same with plexiglass. We also have had some de-escalation training. This was for all of our frontline staff, our educators, our guards, our people in our store, our people at our welcome center. And we gave everybody permission to call help, like right away, if they feel the slightest bit nervous about the interaction that they're having. We are an urban museum. We love our place as an urban museum, but we are still being overly cautious, and we chose to have a police officer come for the first couple of days of our general opening, which is Monday and Tuesday of next week, just to sort of really put the message out there that you have to wear a mask in order to come into our museums. And we've offered absolute support of all frontline staff in enforcing the mask policy. For many of us, cleaning is an issue. We have 5 museums in our museum system. We are sharing the burden of cleaning. Absolutely everybody walks around with a cloth and a spray bottle. I'm not kidding about that. We have our security staff trained to clean our interactives so that they get more cleaning. And basically anybody who's walking around has that spray bottle and that cloth to clean things that are high touch areas. We also have a ton of hand sanitizer out for our guests, and we're asking our guests to wash their hands before and after they do everything that they do in the museums. That, again, thanks to Aaron Bromwich, let us know is one of the best ways to keep everybody safe. So there's lots and lots of other details to our reopening, and I'm sure they'll come up as we talk about this in this opportunity. But I wanted to say that we are overwhelmingly excited about reopening. It was very hard, although it was absolutely the right thing to do. It was very hard to close. And it was hard to be in that waiting place for such a time. We really used it to do a lot of work that needed to be done, but it was still hard to come to the museums and not have them filled with people. So we're excited about the reopening. Yes, we're a little bit anxious. Yes, there are some things that we're wondering about, but overall, we're excited. And one of the things that, well, there are two things that our staff have said. The first thing is we are absolutely as ready as we could possibly be. That felt good. And the other thing they said is that we know people are taking a risk to come and see us. It's a low risk, yes, but it's a risk all the same. So they're ready to give them like extra special visitor services when they get here. And that makes me feel really confident and good as well. So I think that there are a few poll questions that we've got and an opportunity to answer questions at this point. So we'd love to, so here's the poll right here. If you can answer that for us, that would be really helpful to help shape the rest of our conversation.
And a reminder with the town halls, this is a chance for you, everyone on this particular one to actually talk to each other or type in the chat feature if you are more comfortable with the chat instead of actually unmuting yourself. But we do want to hear from you. You know, as Karen and Michael have both said, the town halls, you do learn quite a bit from each other because we're not experts. We're all kind of in this together right now.
Heather, it looks like on question 2, the only option is to choose one instead of 2 or 3 of them.
Okay, I actually can't see the poll for some odd reason, so someone's gonna have to tell me what that one is.
Is your site doing any of the following, requiring waivers of guests hosting?
Oh, I set it up wrong. Sorry, you guys.
So we're about 40% have done the poll. We'll give it another few seconds. All right, we're at 55% of folks have completed the poll. Yep, 60%. We're almost there. All right, I think we will call that good. We're at 63%. Here we go. And these are the results.
So from that poll, it looks like there actually are quite a few museums that are already open. And if you are a museum that's already open, Michael, I don't know if this sounds good to you. Heather, I don't know if this sounds good to you. It might be good to hear from folks if there's any lessons to be learned from those first amount of time being open.
The first guinea pigs.
I would love to hear too what things happened that you didn't expect after opening. Because I think we're just in this constant state of transition, and every week our policies change in some way, and I'm just curious about what other folks have experienced.
Just a reminder, folks are on mute, so you can just unmute yourself.
Quiet group today.
No, don't be shy.
I think we're all writing down the answers to your survey.
It's like, I know there's some people on here from Maine and Connecticut. Come on.
I'll just throw out there a comment from a university museum, and that is that the university has instituted a student COVID code of conduct, which will cover any difficult users, you know, mask wearing, that they've taken that code of conduct a step further. So since we are only open to the university community, we have greater control than most public museums would have, but that's how our university is handling it at Johnson & Wales.
So that's a good way actually to walk into the waiver or disclaimer conversation. So being able to do an actual kind of contract with your visitors is great, because basically you're saying, we're in this together. You're coming to visit us. We're here ready to serve you, but we all have to work together in order to make sure that we can keep this virus at bay. I sent in a disclaimer that we were asked to put up by our insurance agency. We were actually asked to have our visitors sign waivers, and that didn't feel perfectly comfortable to us. We really felt that the way to be friendly was not to put them through that, although we're very happy to hear about other people's thoughts around that. But instead, we decided to put up one very clear, it's on our website too, very clear, but one very clear sign in our museums that say the COVID-19 is an extremely contagious virus that spreads easily from person to person. Exposure is an inherent risk of any public location where people are present. We cannot guarantee you will not be exposed during your visit. And so basically it says, by coming to visit the Springfield museums, you're accepting that risk and you will not hold us liable. Does anybody else have something like that that they're working with or thinking about for their museums? Don't be shy. It is a little nervous to talk with all these people here, but it feels pretty good once you get started. So please, if you do have a waiver, it's really helpful to hear about it, because it was something that, again, made us a little bit anxious whether or not we'd use it.
Or if you thought about using a waiver and decided not to, is another question too.
Yeah.
This is Stephanie. I'm at the Manitowoc Museum in Waterbury, Connecticut, and we are already open to the public. We did something similar to the disclaimer that you just read, Karen. It's pretty much the same kind of context, and we agree with you that having our guests sign a waiver felt really
I'm not sure we're invited into the office.
And we also didn't want the idea of like pen and paper, passing that back and forth, and how would we do that electronically. So that was something else that we considered too. So we posted a disclaimer in clear view as people were entering the museum, and we felt that that was sufficient and worthwhile.
We were a little concerned about the disclaimer. I mean, not the disclaimer, the having a waiver to begin with, and what it does for inspiring confidence in your process. I think for us, the disclaimer was really important to get that communication out to people, but I think I was a little worried about if you're having people signing waivers, whether they're considering that you haven't taken the steps that we did take to make sure that we're providing a safe process. So, but I'm curious if anybody else has actually gone through with the waiver. Or if anybody's considering temperature checks or any other extreme.
We are doing temperature checks for our kids program. We are moving forward with our summer youth activities. They're week-long, in-person, no more than 10 kids per the Connecticut guidelines. And for those programs where the kids are here for a prolonged period of time, we are doing temperature checks, but not for general admission.
For the organization, sorry, go ahead.
We're doing temperature checks for staff, but not for visitors. That seemed, it hasn't been required to do the temperature checks for visitors, and it seems like extremely cumbersome, and it brings up to me, what do you do if someone has a temperature? Then you, what, call the police? I don't know how you enforce. You're asking a lot of the person who has to step up to within an inch of the person to take their temperature, and then asking them to do something very confrontational. It just seems like if we're not required to do that, it seems to be too much for the staff to me.
We're in Newton, Massachusetts. We have decided against temperature checks for similar reasons. They struck us as very fraught for a lot of reasons. The interaction that was required in order to do them seemed fraught. It's also sorry, one-year-old in the background. It's also the case that, you know, the only way to do those would have been with the infrared sensors, which are notoriously inaccurate. And so we were concerned both about false negatives and false positives. So I've also read elsewhere, and this was, I think, at least a small factor in our decision, that taking a temperature is actually a medical procedure, and thus there are HIPAA implications. And so as a consequence, we weren't comfortable accepting any responsibilities that might be attendant to doing that with guests. So we're not requiring temperature checks for guests for some of those reasons.
Hi, this is Sarah. I'm from the New England Aquarium. I'm not the person who's making the decisions, but this is good so that I know the right questions to ask. We haven't opened, we're opening next week. We have decided not to do temperature checks, but what we are doing is we are having staff go into the building and meet in a central location. If you're in the main part of the aquarium, you're in the aquarium. If you're in different buildings, outside the buildings. And this is mainly explained as a way to, if somebody gets sick, then they can be contacted. Now, I'm positive whoever you're checking in with will be like, you have what are your symptoms today? Where have you been? That sort of thing. So that might be an idea as well.
This is Barbara Bowles from the Department of Conservation and Recreation in Massachusetts. We're Massachusetts State Parks. And while our visitor centers are not what you would think of as a classical museum, some of our buildings are of sort of a substantial size, like Lawrence Heritage State Park. Some of our Heritage State Parks are of a substantial size, but most of our visitor centers are quite small. And so just the tightness of the space is a concern for us. And the other thing is that we have something like 26 of them, and we haven't reopened yet, but our parks were never closed. The outdoor portions of the parks were never closed. So we have already gone through some issues with reactive people and people getting outside and too much crowding and everything. But this is very, very helpful to us to be able to sit on this and see what you're doing. We're at the point now of pulling together sort of our visitor center approach and realize that every single visitor center is going to have its own set of guidelines, just because the formats and the layouts are so different. So it really is quite challenging. We don't have an opening date yet or anything, so.
It looks like we have a few questions coming in from the chat. Karen, folks were asking about if you could share the information on the de-escalation training and a link to the language on your sign that you mentioned. And then some other folks were wondering about air quality and air filtering, and if people are asking visitors to sign a logbook for tracing.
Okay, so for the language for the disclaimer sign, I did send a PDF of it to NEMA, and they are certainly welcome to share that. We have similar language on our website, but it's not exactly the same. Again, the sign that's by our front door has the most, this is fair warning here, be cautious. For the, what was the de-escalation training? Michael's de-escalation training is top notch. We used, So he can share, if he would share a little bit about that, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I'll share the videos and the process that we went through with staffs in the chat.
That would be great. And then for air filtration, again, thankfully, actually I didn't mention this when I did that first summary, but this was absolutely a full staff process to get ready to open the museums. We broke up into a bunch of different task forces, with everybody sort of going to the task force that fit their expertise. And Heather Haskell, who is our director of the art museums, took on the air filtration systems. And we have completely new filters in all of our HVAC systems, upgraded so that they're the best possible filter for our museums. We also have portable air filtrations, air filters in all of our spaces that don't have much air circulation at all. And honestly, that has helped tremendously with our feelings of further safety. So I definitely urge folks to look into their MERV, which is, I guess, how an air filtration system works. And also, we wrote out full documents. I mean, we have all of our work is documented. All of our protocols are documented. We have medical forms that our staff fill out every single morning to assure us that they are well. All of these things are being kept as a record to help protect us, but also to help us, protect our staff. Somebody else asked about contact tracing. Because of the way that we do our admissions, we do get everybody's name and number and often address and zip code, and we are saving those. That's thankfully something that's already in place so that we can be helpful if we need to be.
I was going to say the same. So where our admission is still, there's no on-site admission, so you have to purchase in advance, and that's partly so we can collect that information and have it on hand. But I wanted to also underscore something that was brought up here. I think, it's important that you have really airtight operating procedures for the public, but also as you're returning back to office spaces, I think that's really critical too, to think about limiting the amount of use indoor spaces have with your staff, and then really creating, again, airtight operating procedures for that. So we have one office space that the folks who are responsible for operating the daily opening use for a restroom. But other than that, we ask that they stay out of it. And each time that they come in the space, they have a checklist that they have to fill out that includes wearing gloves, washing any knobs that they've touched, a whole safety checklist. And that's really important for us, because what we want to be able to know is, in the off chance someone did get sick, we want to be able to very clearly contact trace without having to then keep all of our staff off for 2 weeks, which I think would be really damaging to be open. And that's proved super helpful for us. And I'm happy to share again any of our log type sheets and things that we're using. I'm curious too if folks who are creating processes like this are they working with other agencies in their region? Are folks working with your Board of Health? And because those have been really great resources for us as well.
Also, just a reminder that if you do have pens out, it's a point of contact. So you're going to have to either give the person the pen or make sure they're clean. Just keep that in mind about the sanitation of anything that a guest will have to touch, because it was mentioned in the chat there about guest books.
Is anybody on here from a historic house too? I know a lot of museums, but I think the historic houses is something that we're dealing with as a challenge right now, because it's an extra set of limitations, having tighter spaces, having really historically sensitive materials that can't be sanitized in the same ways that a museum gallery could be. So we're still looking for some answers on next steps for historic houses, if anybody has any.
We operate 2 historic house museums at Historic Newton and frankly, we don't have any answers right now either. And that's one of the big challenges that we're trying to confront as we figure out if and when it does make sense for us to be open. Because, you know, one of the conversations that we've had recently is kind of what we would need to remove or restrict access to that can't be properly cleaned or is sort of harder to take care of. And one of the things that we have discussed, no decisions yet, is the notion that with all the stuff that we may need to be removing, does it actually make sense to reduce our admission fee? Because we are not necessarily going to be able to offer the same level of experience. But that's one of a myriad, that's one of myriad challenges that we're worried about right now and may not even be our largest one.
Well, and then you have to have the conversation, is it fiscally responsible as a steward of the property too, to be providing access at the detriment, the financial detriment of all the things that you're going to add for a single season. It becomes really challenging very quick to think about opening and what the ramifications could be on your revenue against some of these challenges.
I'm from a historic house, and we're thinking more about increasing our fee rather than decreasing, because we are so limited in numbers beyond just what the state limitations are. You know, we've done a walkthrough now with our staff in our space, trying to figure out what numbers can we really fit in those tiny 17th century rooms. And they're just, it makes it so different from what we're accustomed to, especially for our summer season, when you count on having your most ticket revenue coming in. We're just not going to be able to make it.
Yeah, and one of the other challenges with historic house museums, at least the way that we're set up in one of our museums, basically we have half the square footage it looks like we have, because the exhibit half of each room isn't usable square footage. So we're having to take that into our account with all of our calculations of you know, capacity and how many people we can have in the space, which is just sort of an added wrinkle.
So to add a little bit to this conversation about the nimbleness that we all need to show during this time, and I would say, please don't reduce your prices, even if you don't have as much to show folks, because again, we're needing to carry on into the future. What we chose to do, we actually took everything that somebody could touch out of our Welcome Center. And so we have no maps, we have no leaflets. We put it all onto a mobile website that folks can access with their cell phone. This was not a big expense for us. It was through Guide by Cell, which we already had an audio tour with. Again, an audio tour that's on a cell phone means that nobody has to share anything. It's just labels that are up throughout our museum. What it took was the staff working, you know, really hard to get it in place before we opened. I think that the amount that we are leaning on each other to get from point A to point B is huge, and we need to recognize that. Michael actually is the person who is shouting that out when we met before we got here, is how are we going to celebrate our frontline staff? How are we going to celebrate everybody who has gotten us from point A to point B in this incredibly difficult, stressful time that has been complicated by so many important things in this time period too. So if you have thoughts about how to celebrate our staff and their nimbleness and their problem solving, I would love to hear what you all are thinking.
That was definitely something at earlier, the Aaron Bromwich town hall, that he did talk about the staff. He was more worried about the staff than the visitors, which was nice to hear, because, you know, you guys are the front line and everything like that. I guess another question that came up for the visitor services staff. Someone mentioned that they're going to be doing staggering frontline staff. Is anybody else planning on doing staggering? If you do have the capacity to do that, so they're not on all the time, so they do take a break and stuff like that. If anybody wants to share any information on how you're actually going to be staffing that front line, that would be great too.
This is Jeremy Mendelson. I'm at the Holocaust Museum in DC. Again, I'm not a decision maker, but I've been told that my schedule is going to change from 5 days to a 4 days on and 3 days off, and then 3 days on and 4 days off. So that's one way. And I will actually I will not be seeing my staff full. Like, we have a staff of 20 that usually covers the museum floor. And so we're divided into 10 and 10. So we're never going to be together as a 20 group, really, because of the spacing needs. And then back to an earlier point that someone was asking about recognition of staff. I've been thinking about that for the staff that have been on the site maintaining our facilities while we've been closed. And one of the ways that I've been thinking of doing that is just having our visitor service staff creating like not a Google card, but a PowerPoint card that everybody can sign and add pictures of ourselves to say thank you as we come back to opening our museums, to thank them for actually maintaining our museums again while we've been closed and while they've had to do some extraordinary things as well just to maintain the building during this closing time period.
Okay, so it looks like there is some comments coming in about the staggering times. In the chat there.
I was going to say, Jeremy, that sounds like a really nice way to kind of honor and celebrate folks using Google Slides or Google as like a way to digitally thank them. It kind of ties into somebody who mentioned earlier how to communicate between the teams. I don't know if anybody else can speak to that communication.
This is Sarah from the New England Aquarium again. It's summertime, so our hours are 9 to 6 every day. And we just added members hour from 8 to 9, which will give our members a chance to come in early before everybody else does. Or maybe, I don't know if that will fit in with their schedule, but it also staggers our staff. So we'll have some people starting at 7:30, some people starting at 8:30, and some people starting at 9:30.
I guess that's another good question to ask is, I know looking at some of the announcements that some of the museums are cutting their hours because they're, the cleaning process and stuff like that. Is anybody actually thinking of the opposite of extending it out a little bit more into the evening to have the availability to have more people come in? Again, that would mean staggering your work hours as well. I'm always for later hours, by the way, so I can go to museums after work, but that's me.
I am too. The MFA, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, I was talking with a friend of mine who volunteers there. They normally have evening hours, and she was saying that she's not sure that they would have the money to continue that when they reopen, and they're not looking to reopen until at least early fall, so I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah. The other time with hours too is I know we have the members, all the museums that are opening up have the members come in first prior to the opening to the public. Is anybody thinking about doing more of what the grocery stores are doing? So more for people at a higher risk to come in at a different hour so they're a little bit away from everybody else. It's also one of those things if people are wanting to come or not, as well as the other question.
Well, we have our Mondays are set aside from 10 to noon for people 60 years old and older, and the 13th will be our first Monday, and we do wonder if anybody's going to show up. Certainly the elders I know are not willing to go out yet, but we wanted to give them time just in case.
I think it's also good PR.
Yes, it is.
It's very good PR.
We're thinking about that. We have a traditionally very large craft festival that we have outdoors in September. And we're thinking about safe ways to proceed with that. And one of the things that we would like to try to do is come up with some senior hours in the beginning of the day to really make sure that that population that would love to come to the craft festival can and feel safe to do so.
So we do have some comments about people doing walking tours that they are staggering it. So it is morning and evening, just to avoid the New England heat, basically, which I think is a great thing because going for a walk in the evening is awesome. So thanks to you guys from the main museums up there.
With walking tours and outdoor programs, one of the things, is Matt Villamino with Mass DCR, one of the things that we're doing is ordering the little belt pack PA systems so that even a group where we wouldn't normally need that, we can space people out a little bit more and not have our interpretive staff member have to strain their voice. So that way, if it's a 5-6 person group, they can stay away, but they can still hear.
That's very smart because I'm thinking of my mom too, is hard of hearing, and she wouldn't be able to hear anything without that help. So that's good.
And I'll see if I can dig up the link of the unit that we were looking at and put that in the chat. If not, I can email it to you, Heather, afterwards.
Yep, and I'll make sure I put everything, all the PDF that Karen mentioned and stuff like that on the website later. Yeah, Lisa Lutz also mentioned that they also bought the equipment for Castine, so that's great.
You know, I wanted to go back to, somebody had asked about the masks that I had mentioned. There is a mask that speaking of folks who can't hear as well, or folks who need to be able to see your mouth to be able to tell what you're saying. There is a mask that has a clear section. We're just not sure about it. We don't know how well it'll work. We think it'll get fogged up. We think it'll be hot, but we did buy some to try. But also locally, there's a plastics manufacturer who have come up with a face shield that has a skirt at the bottom of it that basically seals the mask, but leaves your face completely open. And again, we're going to buy a few and try them out. Safety, of course, is the top priority right now, but with that extra skirt on, it looks like it's something that could contain your breath. We'll see how it goes.
And Tegan also pointed out, which is great, Tegan, you know, special hours anyway, even after the pandemic for vulnerable people would be great, because I do know some children's museums that have different hours as well, which is great. I think that's definitely, we need to look at being accessible to everybody that would like to come to the museum. So that's great. Thanks, Tegan, for that reminder. I always love it when we have people from outside New England. Thank you, Stephanie, from New Mexico, the George O'Keeffe Museum. If you guys have other questions that you would like to ask the group, just go ahead and unmute yourself or just type in the chat and one of us will read it out. That would be great because, you know, we're all here together. We all have some of the same questions. And then also to mention to the historic houses that are on the call today, we will be having another town hall on July 21st with our historic site PAG. So that's another way to talk to other people because I know the historic houses probably won't be opening up as early as the other larger museums are opening.
Hi, Ellery from the Rhode Island Historical Society. I did have a question for the group. Is anyone experiencing pressure from their board or their leadership to open before you feel ready to open, and how you're navigating that?
Good question.
This is Sarah from the New England Aquarium, and I'm a visitor's assistant. I'm not anywhere near the board, but we have penguins and we have fish to feed, and it's been one of my concerns that we would I mean that we're still buying the fish to feed the animals whether we're open to the public or not, because if we don't have animals we won't have a museum. And I felt a little bit of pressure to open not before we're ready, but I think my colleagues who have been working on it have felt pressure to get things ready as quickly as possible as time kind of goes on, so that we could open when the governor says that we can. I am glad to see that we're not, I mean, stage 3 for Boston starts next Monday. We're not opening until the following Thursday, so at least we have a little bit of leeway, so they're not rushing to open right on Monday, which is when they first announced that stage 3 would be delayed a week. Ticket sales went up on our website for that Monday within hours of that decision. So I'm glad they're allowing a little bit of leeway, but it's something that I wonder. I have absolute confidence in my supervisors, in my lead staff, and my management, knowing that they won't have us on the floor if it's safe. But I'm wondering for other places like that, if you don't have that type of confidence, how would you feel?
And Ellery, it sounded like somebody mentioned earlier, a historical site in Maine, that their board might have not agreed with the walking tour component, but they pushed ahead advocating for staff.
That was me, and there was some pushback. Some board members wanting us to open, but as a staff, what we did, and there's all 3 of us, we wrote up our, sort of concerns and came up with ways that we could combat those concerns by doing the outdoor tours. So we just kept pushing back and pushing back with them. And luckily it wasn't the full board. It was a small contingent of the board. So we were able to convince the naysayers that for us, because we have volunteers who are, in the 70+ age range, who are the ones who would come in contact, and yes, we'd have a plexi screen up, and we looked at all that. The other thing we looked at was the cost. We actually outlined the total cost for opening versus doing the tours, which had much less cost. And so that was an aha moment for the board as well, because we're not recouping any money either way. We don't charge admission, so the admission side of it wasn't important. But you just need to come up with your facts and just keep pushing them and getting your director. I don't know if you're the director, Ellery, but get the director behind you.
Thank you, that helps.
I think the other follow-up question to that one is more or less dealing with the visitor services staff that has decided not to come back, and not wanting to pressure them either, because it is a stressful situation for all of us, basically, to come back and be around other people.
One thing that's helped us with people who have left while we were at home is to do, I think like Jeremy said, to have each person make up a little PowerPoint of, instead of everybody signing a card, everybody make a quick little PowerPoint to the person. And that has definitely, it's helped me a great deal with the closure issue and not being able to say goodbye to staff who have left for one reason or another. I don't think we've had any staff, sorry, I'm from Shelburne Museum in Vermont, and I don't think we've had any staff that have left because of COVID, but we've had staff leave for other jobs and stuff. So it just helps with the closure piece. We don't get to get together in a boardroom and offer them cake, but at least it's a little something we can do during a Zoom meeting.
Oh, that's good. Michael, do you mind sharing your de-escalation video again in the chat?
Yeah.
The other thing, just a reminder with everybody doing everything online, it's probably a good idea also to have a different way for people to reserve tickets and stuff like that, because not everybody's going to be able to actually have access in that regard. So having some kind of other reservation system in place as well, definitely for accessibility, is something to think about as well. Because as I'm watching everybody like, oh, you have to reserve online, I'm like, that's kind of limiting for some people. So keep that in mind as well.
And also keep in mind that there are some things that cannot be done online, such as if you have a discount for people who are on SNAP or anything like that, some of that stuff has to be done in person, unfortunately.
Yep.
For anybody that's already opened, has anyone had an increase, like a large increase in the number of phone calls? I'm a little concerned that people who tend to visit our museum are older, not quite as tech savvy, and I'm just wondering if maybe having some extra people answering the phones might be a good idea.
We did, especially in the beginning, especially around certain things that we only recently opened our restrooms, and that was a challenge for some visitors. We were strictly saying that people should be trying to stay local and visit the property if they're nearby. But I think now that as more things have opened up, people are coming from a little bit more distance. Some people, you know, if they're going to come here for lunch, need a restroom. So we were getting quite a few calls about that. Nothing that our staff, I think, couldn't triage. Nothing out of the norm. But we get a lot of Facebook messages, though. That seems to be like people's new, especially because we post a lot of our like events or opening on Facebook. We'll get a lot of quick responses, especially people who haven't necessarily read all the information yet will ask us a question about restrooms or can they bring their dog or things like that.
Michael, I don't think the paste worked, by the way, in the chat.
Oh, no.
It happens.
I'll find a safe way to share.
Yeah, and as Patricia mentioned in the chat feature, basically, is that they just want to call to verify if you're open or not, because sometimes websites aren't updated or directories aren't updated. So I know I've called a couple restaurants, but that's just me.
So we're getting close to the end, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
okay.
Yep. So if anybody has any last minute questions that they would like to ask the group, now is the time to do that.
And I wanted to make sure to say that communication is what it's all about. And we all know that no matter how many times you tell somebody something, they're going to ask you that same question anyway. So you're going to have to communicate it again with patience and grace. But you know, we're totally all doing this together. Everybody is what's been really, again, heartening about these meetings and the fact that we've all been able to talk to each other is that we're opening up with really similar protocols. So it's not like somebody's going to come in and say, well, I went to so-and-so museum and I got to do this. Well, they didn't. We're all doing the same stuff and it helps tremendously. So I guess I wanted to, on our first day open after all of this, and hopefully we're not going to reclose again. Let's hope that everything goes well. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for participating in these kind of meetings, for sharing information, for sharing links to incredible videos, and for the really great ideas that you have been spreading around, because they have made a difference for all of us. Thank you.
Definitely to follow up, Karen, on that one. If you ever have any idea for a future town hall, if you'd want to lead one, we love that too. Definitely give the NEMA staff an email and we will pursue this one. So this one was actually a suggestion from another NEMA member that they wanted to see a visitor services one. So definitely email us, definitely as you guys are opening back up again. Let us know how we can help you in the future, and definitely stay tuned to the NEMA website for upcoming events. Scarlett just put it in there on the chat feature of our calendar listing. Definitely stay tuned to that one. Follow us on social media. We definitely post all of that there. And again, I want to thank Karen and Michael for leading this conversation today. And Karen, good luck with the reopening. And Michael, enjoy the sunshine out there. Do you have any final words, Michael? You have to unmute yourself though.
No,
there you
no,
go.
just to say that I'll make myself and our team available too to help brainstorm anything with people. We still don't have all the answers here either, and we change things every day and learn new things every day. And I think it's important that we keep this conversation and format going. So I'll put my contact info in there for anybody who wants to reach out with any questions.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and enjoy the summer day. Bye.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.